Good evening, guys. Daniil Kleyman here. Let's go ahead and get this started. Can everyone, and I appreciate all of those that are on the call already for being here on time. That's always nice and appreciated. Can everyone type into their chat boxes? Let me know that you can hear me, that I'm not talking to myself. Let me know how my sound is coming across in my thick Russian accent, if you can figure out what I'm saying. I've been in the country for a few years, so I think my English is getting better. All right, Andrew, Carrie, Jamil, Clayton, Dave, Randy, John, Snyder, Philip, Bill, Barbara, Joanna. I see a lot of familiar names here. I appreciate all of you guys being in time. Sam, Tony, Joseph, Rick. All right, I've got hundreds of you on, so I can't say hello to all of you, but all right, I sound good. Good. All right, so I am quite grateful that you chose to spend your Thursday night hanging out with me and my special guests. That shows me that you're definitely someone that cares about evolving as a real estate investor more than watching the latest primetime TV shows, which is great. And, you know, by the way, if anybody watches Vikings, it's on Thursday nights. I love that show, and I'm missing it to be here with you guys, and that's perfectly okay. That's why they created On Demand and TiVo for me. So if you're on this call, you're most likely a subscriber of mine, which means you're using one of our software programs, Rehab Valuator, Rental Valuator, et cetera, et cetera. You know, whether you're just using the free version or have bought the premium, either way, I'm very grateful that you're using our products. And we take great pride in the software we put out and in the support behind it. And so to give back and say thank you, every once in a while I like to do these kind of content webinars about a topic that I myself am not necessarily an expert in. Instead, I bring on experts in whatever field is most relevant to today's market and what's going on. And, you know, I let them drop some serious knowledge on you. So today we're going to be talking about seller financing, and we're going to focus on the effect of the recent Dodd-Frank Act on this method of creative financing. Now, seller financing is a super important topic for both buying and selling real estate. Buying real estate, it's very relevant because obviously it's a great way to use someone else's money to take control of a property without going to banks. And if you can negotiate the right deal and the right seller financing scenario, you can take possession of a property without a large down payment and sometimes without recourse. And if you don't know what recourse is, it just means you're not personally guaranteeing the loan. So there are a lot of really great advantages to buying with seller financing. For selling real estate, it's becoming more and more relevant. It's becoming a much more relevant topic for selling your deals. Mortgage originations are way down. Many people, most people cannot go out and get bank financing to save their lives. So if you're rehabbing a property or if you're selling your existing properties, if you can offer seller financing, you know, whether it's on your retail rehabs or properties you sell to investors, whatever, you can potentially double or triple your buyer base, your potential buyer base. But the recent Dodd-Frank Act makes particularly selling with seller financing more complicated in most situations. Also, if you're buying notes, you need to go and look, and you need to be careful, and we'll talk about all that tonight. The two guests I've got on with me are experts in this particular field. Mark, Terry, how are you guys?
Good. What, can you hear us good?
Yeah, Mark, you coming through well. Terry, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me tonight. I'm excited to have this conversation. We're trying to get the word out, and your platform is a way for us to really leap ahead of this.
Well, good. I'm really glad to have you guys on with me. Let me tell you a little bit about Mark and Terry before I hand it over to them. So Terry, and let me switch my slides here. Terry Lewis is a licensed real estate broker, mortgage loan originator, and seller finance specialist. He has successfully owned and operated a mortgage company over the last 25 years. As a licensed real estate agent and broker for 31 years, Terry has combined expertise and experience fulfilling a rapidly expanding and growing need in the real estate industry, seller financing compliance, consulting, and private note sales. He's got years of transaction experience, and he believes that the secret to home ownership lies in that people deserve an affordable home at reasonable terms. He got his start in the real estate industry back in the 80s. So, Terry, you've been around for a long time. Very cool. And having been trained in those days, Terry has seen and experienced all of this before, and he'll share his knowledge with us tonight. And Mark, who looks very relaxed in that picture, is a real estate broker, also seller finance specialist. He's been in the industry for 10 plus years, brings a wealth of knowledge to the table in the form of alternative finance. Specifically, Mark is a registered financial consultant and registered mortgage advisor, which means that along with his experience in seller financing, he is also well equipped to guide basically everyone, realtors, investors, sellers, and buyers, right through the process of seller financing. So here is the plan, guys. I'm going to hand the presentation over to Mark. Mark and Terry have about 45 minutes worth of content, pure education prepared for you. Take lots of notes, get rid of the distractions, turn the TV off, get rid of Facebook. You know the drill. There's really no point for you to be on tonight unless you're fully focused and are learning. Otherwise, you're just wasting everybody's time, including your own. So try to save your questions till the end, because once Mark is done with his content, Terry and Mark will both stick around and we'll go through Q&A. We'll take all the questions you guys have. We're here. All three of us are here to add value. And also make sure you stick around till the end, because they're going to give you a special bonus for attending. Everybody that's going to be on at the end of the call with us is going to get an extremely critical Dodd-Frank, these guys call it cover your ass disclosure form. It's basically a form that you absolutely need to have if you're selling properties with seller financing in any state. So, Mark, are you ready for me to turn the slides over to you?
Let's do it.
All right. We're going to make Mark the presenter. We should be able to see your screen now.
All right.
There we go. Okay.
Perfect. So this is the perfect start of the story. And pretty much everyone on this call has been exposed to this movie in some way, shape, or form. It was a movie, obviously, not that long ago, and really relevant to what we're going through right now. We have a perfect storm brewing. We have a lender recession. We have 85% of the people that qualified for mortgages and received mortgages in the last 60 months, recent independent study showed that they simply would not qualify today. Mortgage originations are down 55% year over year from last month to the month before, and 50% the month prior to year over year. What this means is we are in a place where you need to become the bank. And that's what we're going to talk about. And it doesn't matter whether you are on the buyer side, the seller side, or even the note side. And interestingly enough, a lot of people have this misguiding impression that you can just buy the note. And somehow buying the note, it absolves you from the Dodd-Frank exposure. And like my beloved grandmother says, when you lay down with dogs, you get up with fleas. and what that means is if you're buying a lemon, you are acquiring a lemon, and you are subject to all of the garbage that's going to be associated with it. And there's a lot to be aware of, and we're going to talk about it. And what you're going to quickly and increasingly discover as you sit through these next handful of slides is that this is absolutely, completely, entirely the direction that we're headed. And you can do one of two things: run for the hills, or you can look at and embrace the opportunity that is upon us. And make no mistake, there is an opportunity. Later on in this presentation, we're going to show you a transaction that we actually closed today, literally an hour ago, 2 hours ago. And what it shows you is what you can do in terms of better, safer, smarter real estate. And that's what we're going to be talking about. So moving right along, we look at the normal pattern, the normal cycle, and I don't know what market you're in. Obviously, you have your own specific market that is specific and unique to you. But generally speaking, this is the general cycle of the real estate market, or any investment market for that matter. And what all the experts are agreeing is that we've certainly gone beyond optimism. We've gone beyond excitement. And many say that we've even passed the point of euphoria where we have sky-high prices, and instead we're approaching denial and maybe even fear. And here's the question. Are you fearful? You don't have to be. What this is a fantastic, phenomenal solution to be able to compete and out of necessity make your deals safer and more profitable than your competition. And this is what we're going to be talking about, is how to baffle your competition, how to absolutely leave them bedazzled as how you did it. Because when you go in with seller financing, you can acquire at a higher price and you can sell at a higher price, which means your margins, utilizing the bank of you, being the bank, taking on the ideology of the bank, you win. It's as simple as that. And what you're going to increasingly discover through each slide that you see and through all this conversation and maybe even up to the Q&A is that it's all about embracing the mindset of being the bank. And this is not very difficult stuff. You need to understand some things. Certainly you've got great assistance, great support, great resources out there, the best in the industry, and this will help you facilitate that process. If you're not using Daniil's software, as soon as you get off this call, just go buy it. We own it. This is how we make sense out of our deals, and you will too. And this will help you, guide you through. So, existing home sales, where are we today? Well, we're pretty much at the end of this, all the way to the right, and we can see that in the last summer, we peaked out. If we go all the way back a couple years, we can see what we talked about, euphoria and optimism and excitement brewing until it really peaked out as pretty much all the industry experts, this is from the National Association of Realtors, tell us. And when we looked at pending home sales, certainly if we look at 100, that 100 mark, we can see that, of course, we were below, and we can see once again, pending home sales, we peaked out last summer, and we can see where we're headed. And this is not a commentary on doom and gloom. Certainly the lender recession is something to take a look at, but of course we're going to talk about how to look at it optimistically. Here's probably the biggest story of where you guys are at in your business, where you've been the last couple years. We can see that the percentage of distressed sales where you could just know an REO asset manager and get on the phone with them and do your deals just out of having literally 3 contacts at major to mid to community banks, whatever. You could essentially buy their REOs and either buy them and hold them or buy them and flip them. Either way, you can see the downward trend until as of recent, we've gone from 35 to 15%, which again supports the fact that it is all about creating your transactions. Months of inventory. We know, and National Association of Realtors tells us that 5 to 6 months is normal market inventory activity. We can see where we were when the market sucked not that long ago. And we can see the downward trend, and we can see that obviously a year ago we had very low inventory, very scarce inventory, and that was pretty much the news of the day, and that was what everyone was talking about all around. And going forward, 1 year later to today, we can see that we're approaching back to that bell curve, back to that normal market inventory. Interest rates. Again, when we talk about this perfect storm, where are we headed with respect to interest rates? These are the major indicators of where we're headed. If we're in the low 4s to 4.5, depending on if you're a Fannie, a conventional, or an FHA loan today, we can see that every major reporting is that a year from now, we're going to increase our rates at least 25%. So if 85% of the people don't qualify for mortgages today, it naturally means that even less of them will qualify in an increasing interest rate market. And realistically, when we look at And if I'm going too fast, Daniel, certainly stop
No,
me.
no, you're good. I mean, this is really interesting stuff.
Okay. And if we look at the last month, we've had a flurry of reportings, and this is really the big opportunity here. If you're in the flip market, which a lot of you guys are, more than 4 million buyers want to buy this year. This is a fact. This has been well supported across the board from CNN, CNBC, you name it. You see the headlines here, don't believe a word I say, go ahead, Google it, and you'll find the same thing. Well, what this tells us is we need to figure out ways to bring more buyers into our deals. We need to triple our buyer pool. We need to expose our properties, if we're flipping them, to more and more buyers. And to the degree that we are successful in exposing our properties and giving options, as we'll show you later on, you will attract higher purchase prices, you will attract more buyers, more eager buyers, more willing buyers, and buyers willing to buy without you paying their closing costs or repair credit.
So Mark, sorry to interrupt you, but just to drive the point home, right?
Sure.
More than 4 million first-time buyers want to enter the housing market. What percentage of that 4 million people that want to buy a house this year would you guess can qualify for conventional financing?
Based on the numbers that the last study we read last month tells us, and the attorney that we work with, they're saying that the last 60 months, 85% of the people going back today with the same criteria would absolutely not qualify. Now, certainly if you're in a VA market, that's unaffected by new Dodd-Frank regulation, but I mean, one out of four would, can go see their bank, and the rest of them, you need to figure out a way to get them in the door.
So 75% you would say of these 4 million people that want to buy a home this year, who you may have inventory for, they can't go out and get a bank loan. That's really, I just want to drive that point home, right? That's why we're here talking about this stuff, right?
If I could interject a minute, this is Terry. What we're trying to show here is that the home purchase market for a homeowner, home buyer, millennials, however you want to categorize people, it's alive and well. The American dream is alive, and people want to own homes and live in them and fix them up and have that American dream. The problem is the lending recession that's happening, and it's because of the Dodd-Frank Act that became fully implemented in January 10th of this year, and that's where the percentage changes that we're talking about came from.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't happen, so it's kind of like building up to what this Dodd-Frank actually is and what it's doing to the marketplace.
So, right. So Uncle Sam once again helps improve the economy. Right. Okay. Just want to clarify. Okay. All right, Mark. Sorry. Let's keep going.
It actually to close that loop, and that it's a great question, and really to close that loop in a very strong way. There was a great study. It was either NBC or CNN. I can't remember. They found that the buyers that are out there, the people we're talking about here, are looking for one of two things. They're looking for the same properties you guys are looking for, essentially your competition, looking for properties with deferred maintenance where they can get a great deal on it and fix it up themselves, or they're looking for the super premium, fully rehabbed, massively upgraded property. So what our solution is it's kind of option 3. It's the default option where, what if you don't want to put $100,000 into a property? Now, obviously, markets are relevant and relative. Certainly, if in your market you guys aren't putting $100,000 into your properties, but and some of your subscribers as well. But in Southern California, $100,000 rehab is not that rare. Mm-hmm. So really, that's you got to have more than 2 options. It's not about just offering vanilla and chocolate. Strawberry still works. So what we're talking about is the mortgage recession, and a great video series that comes out every other day is the National Real Estate Post, and they actually just put one out today saying it's no longer a recession. We might actually be in a lender depression. And again, when we talk about and look at and think about Dodd-Frank, a lot of this has been driven, and we can argue whether by default or design, but they are getting the lenders out of the business. And this is a revival of the 80s where seller financing was a proven solution over time. And when we talk about seller financing, we're talking about, very simply, the seller becomes a bank. You, as the seller, are Bank of America, Wells Fargo, who, pick your favorite brand. Money exchanges hands. The process is exactly like you were to go to the bank and get financed and get approved and go through the painful process, only this process can be done very quickly with a lot fewer obstacles and a lot fewer roadblocks. So when we understand seller financing, we got to look at the history. In the 70s and 80s, all the way up to 1992, seller financing dominated the market. And it depends who you ask, but anywhere from 28 to 32% of total transactions on the market were seller financed. Obviously, it was a different market that was driving it and fueling it and igniting that movement back then. And it was based on interest rates being sky high and people realizing that they could carry an amazing rate of return, far more than they could get in any other investment, kind of like it is today, just not as big with respect to carrying your own financing. But realistically, this is a proven strategy. This isn't Terry and I coming on here and saying, hey guys,
look what we invented.
Right. Hey Daniel, we had an idea. Wouldn't it be cool if people looked at it this way? But that's how a lot of people receive it, because it was so long ago. The average person in real estate has only been in real estate from the last maybe 7 or 8 years. And during the subprime days, it went away. When subprime emerges and credit becomes loose and available, seller financing becomes almost non-existent, except for smart people wanting great rates of return. Well, and of course, smart people not wanting the hassles of rentals with termites, taxes, toilets, and wanting an even better rate of return than managing their rentals. The point here is, this is a revival, and you guys can get ahead of this wave. It's not hot, and it's not red hot yet. We are looking at probably a 90-day window for you to get your ducks in a row and become, the guy in your market that says, hey, seller, when you want a great rate of return, and, however you want to structure your deals, obviously there's different ways to structure deals, but you can be known as the guy in your market as the seller financing guy, and you should be telling people that. When you think of owner financing, seller carrybacks, whatever you want to call it. And by the way, the number one, if people are wondering how to advertise seller financing are the hot two keywords for Google. And you'll hear people refer to them as seller carrybacks, owner carries, whatever, and people know them as different things. But that's I'm sensing someone wants to say something.
Yeah. So here's what I want to. Something that you said struck me, Mark, because when I think of seller financing, if I go and I deal with a seller that wants to sell, a normal seller, correct me if I'm wrong, will usually just want to sell outright, right? Very few sellers wake up and say, I would like to sell my property but not get all my money right now, right? So from my experience, you typically have to convince a seller to agree to seller financing. There's a bit of an education there and a bit of a curve. But what struck me that you said that I thought was really intelligent was the fact that because you're buying with seller financing, you can potentially afford to pay more than other guys, right? Mm-hmm. And that puts a different spin on it, right? If you tackle your competition in terms of, well, I can afford to pay more than my competition, and that's how you sell the deal to the seller, right? Hey, I'll pay you more, agree to terms. Then that's the right way to attack it. Because when buyers usually go out and they look at deals and they propose seller financing, usually it's a hard sell most of the time, right? Unless you pitch it the right way.
Yeah, and you got to show cash flow. You really have to, and I'm talking to the source. You need to illustrate what is the long-term financial impact of them agreeing to finance you?
Mm-hmm.
Another part of that is also how long have you owned the home and what's your basis? And have you talked to your CPA about the taxes that you owe should you cash out? And it's going to be upwards of 30%,
Right.
federal, state,
Yep.
local, and maybe an installment sale, which involves some seller carry, would be the best thing for you. And we'll get into other slides, but that's really, it's not hard to convince people to do this.
Well, but I guess again, I'm really big on sort of hammering points home until they just explode, right? That's if you guys haven't gotten that sense about me. But so the point is you have to know how to educate the seller the right way, because what I've seen a lot of investors do is they go to the seller and they say, oh, you want $100,000 for your property? Here's 80, and you got to carry the note because I can't go get bank loans, right? So they pitch it the wrong way, and then they usually, of course, get a big fat no, right? So if you know the benefits of seller financing to the seller, and if you know how to educate your seller, that's how you get deals done.
Correct.
Yeah, and the other thing to consider is the sheer number of retirees facing retirement right now that are selling their home, have no retirement income, and this is kind of the part of the perfect storm we're talking about. And at the same time, they have, with no retirement income, they have a ton of deferred maintenance on their property. And for someone to come in there and buy it, they're going to have to discount it. And Jack Sternberg talks about this. Let's discount the mortgage. Let's not discount the real estate. And, so a lot, another thing you could do is come in there with a couple different offers and use the comparison approach to get them to see that your offer is actually, and I hate to keep bringing it up because, for the sake of a broken record, but your software shows and illustrates, and obviously people on this call are already aware of that, illustrates the financial impact of deciding to go left or right.
Yeah.
And you shouldn't put an offer in there never ever put an offer out there in this particular niche context when you're convincing and persuading a seller to sell to you with financing without a cash flow analysis. I mean,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And thank you for the endorsement.
Well, we are subscribers ourselves. So, alrighty. So moving right along, seller financing today. We already talked about this. We don't need to rehash this. The thing that Terry talked about is very, very noteworthy here. Capital gains are going through the roof. We used to, in California, be at a combined 25.7% state and federal for capital gains. People are now over 30%. We had an attorney that was telling us that in some scenarios you could face a 38.9% capital gains exposure on a transaction. Guys, this is not flipping properties and sucking up a huge capital gain. This is not when you look at the numbers, maybe the most optimal way to make a deal work. And when we look at the future, we have to think about not just the number of people out there with homes that you can show them how you can create a way better cash flow for them than the stock market can get, but as well, what are we looking at with respect to regulation? In all likelihood, we're probably looking at more and more of the same. This is an interesting slide, and yes, I'm aware it says 2010. It's there by design, and this shows you that even during the time leading up to the place that we are now, that seller finance transactions were on the rise. A recent study showed we're actually at 8.8% of total transactions nationwide are already seller financed. So just showing you kind of where we've gone from nowhere and very few, and the fact that we have such dramatic growth. Even though 8% might not sound like a lot to you, it is a lot compared to where we were a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and here even 4 years ago. And then moving yourself out in the future, taking a wild guess as to the fact that so many people don't qualify for mortgages. All the big money from foreign investors, they've already bought to a large degree. Where are the deals going to be done and made? Seller financing. And when we look at the myths and understand the myths of seller financing, these are, and if you go to our website, don't do it now, you can certainly do it after the call, you'll see the top 12 myths of Dodd-Frank and seller financing, and people think collectively for some reason there's such a level of ignorance, and we discussed why there's such a level of ignorance in as much as the fact that people just weren't exposed to this, and the fact that over 80% of people in the industry just weren't around when seller financing was an accepted way to do business and do transactions. Well, people think that only desperate people or properties carry notes, and that you need all cash. By the way, you can take properties that have mortgages subject to with seller financing, and you can acquire properties that way. You can acquire properties. You can wrap an upside-down property and make it work that way. And there's a lot of properties out there that have been modified and have 2% mortgages on them. You can create a spread and an arbitrage. This webinar, we want to stay on track, and we're not talking about all the advanced strategies, but that's just one to really debunk the myth that you need a paid-off free and clear home. You really don't. And more sophisticated buyers are indeed buying because they see the maximum overall benefit of doing so. And above all else, seller benefits are huge. We'll show you a transaction where we close with not a nickel or not a dollar paid in repair credits on a $100,000 repair needed property. We didn't pay any buyer closing costs. And realistically, you can do a very fast, quick transaction here. And then if you want to cash out, you can sell the note or part of the note after closing. So there's a tremendous amount of flexibility here with doing seller finance transactions. And these are the different strategies. There's 8 different strategies. And again, we're just touching on it. We're not going to go deep into this. And for those that are mismatchers here, we are aware that a loan assumption is not a seller finance strategy, and a loan assumption is definitely different than purchasing subject to. A lot of people read into that. I don't know why, but subject to is definitely a seller finance strategy. And Dodd-Frank essentially made all of these strategies, with the exception of a lease option, and most attorneys are actually telling people to comply with Dodd-Frank for lease options, but Dodd-Frank made all of these seller finance strategies that have been done over time now needing to be compliant with the Act. And this is what we're talking about. The S.A.F.E Act, obviously, in 2008 created the NMLS, the National Mortgage Licensing System, and it's created a federal law where mortgage lenders are now like your stockbrokers. They're regulated federally under the NMLS via the S.A.F.E Act. Well, that wasn't enough. In 2010, the granddaddy of them all, the Dodd-Frank Financial Reform Act, came around and essentially amended TILA to say that seller financing is now a federally regulated license activity, just like any other loan, any other mortgage under the S.A.F.E Act. So above and beyond anyone just putting 100% cash down, any combination of any lending of credit, any arranging of credit, is now affected by the S.A.F.E Act, and now more importantly superseding that or extending it, depending on how you choose to look at it, the Dodd-Frank Financial Reform Act. And again, just like it says here, it amended the Truth in Lending Act to require disclosures for seller finance transactions. And one point, as long as we're hammering points through, and stick this in your back pocket, burn it big and bright into your consciousness. And if you take away anything from this, people are asking the wrong questions. It's not about exemptions here, although we'll talk about what the exemptions are because it's good to be educated. What this means is there's huge opportunity in complying here, and there's a very simple solution. And it's shocking to me that more attorneys want to talk about the exemptions rather than doing the simple matter of complying. So here's the quick and easy test when we talk about exemptions. Is your buyer, or are you as the buyer, a consumer? Meaning, are you occupying the property? If you're occupying the property, it is not exempt under all these acronyms here. I'm not even going to repeat them. Some people might get a headache looking at them.
I think I'm having a seizure right now.
And yeah, and that's not our intention here. It's very simple. The quick and easy test: is the buyer a consumer? The exemptions. Even if the buyer is a consumer, there are exemptions. 1 or 3 properties in any 12-month period, and this is where a lot of attorneys, and I'll actually show you a more in-depth slide coming up on each one of these scenarios, whether it's 1 or 3, because people really don't know what that means. So the 1 property exemption means that the owner is the occupant. This is basically to mean that you are selling your own property with seller financing, and you can have a balloon. There's no negative amortization. You are, again, owner-occupied. You're not an investor. It can be adjustable, and you can do 1 every 12 months. You cannot have built the home yourself. And the issue here, and when we talk about the bigger question and asking the question looming large above all else, is above and beyond getting around this exemption, which is stupid to begin with, because you as a seller typically don't pay for the origination of a Dodd-Frank note. So you're trying to save yourself something that you're not going to have to pay for, that as well will adversely affect the quality of your note. And the issue here is, when creating a note, it needs to be investor grade, because all of us want to sell our notes, and certainly even if you're in this scenario selling your own owner-occupied property, you want to sell it for maximum value. What if you mess up and you write a bad note and you have a $200,000 note and it's subject to a 30% discount? You have a $60,000 loss, all because you were trying to save a very nominal fee that's paid for by your buyer. It's crazy. The 3 loan exemption. This means you're an investor. So this would be pretty much everyone on the call. Now, it's important to very importantly understand that if you take the exemption, you want to sell under the 3 loan exemption, which I hear people always talking about, this means no balloon. So I don't know anyone on this call that's an educated, sophisticated real estate investor that's going to write a 30-year note due in 30 years, because we know that inflation will eat up and cannibalize your note to the extent that your note is worthless. And you know, this is a worthless exemption. I'm just showing it so you know what it is.
Well, let's dwell on that for a second, right? Why is it smart to have a balloon? If I sell you a house, right? If I sell you a house and I carry the note,
yeah,
I want to get paid off quicker than 30 years because I want to get my money and put that money into something else, right? First of all.
Yeah.
Or I'm going to sell you the property, I'm going to carry back the financing, but then I'm going to probably season the note for a few months until the note has some payment history, and then I'm going to try to go out and sell that note and get my money that way so I can go and put that money into another deal, correct?
Absolutely,
100%. And if I go to sell that note, how many buyers will want to buy a note that does not have a balloon?
Gomer Pyle, maybe.
So that's why balloons are important, right? So if you're gonna correct me if I'm misinterpreting you, but the only way you can get exempt at all, even if you stick under the 3 transactions per year, is if you create a note that does not have a balloon, which then essentially makes that note non-marketable, and you're going to be stuck with the note and with taking payments for the next 30 years, which basically makes you as dumb as Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, correct?
100%.
Okay.
And the caveat to what you just said, and this does come up, what if you write a low interest rate note just to make a deal work? And people do that. And you write, let's say, a 4 to 6% note, just again to make a deal work. You want to get out of a deal, and you write a low interest rate note, and you don't have a balloon in it. You have that interest rate risk. We don't know it. I don't know what interest rates are going to be in the future, and so there's a lot of risk there. So, yeah, this is to hear people go on and on to real estate investors about the exemption when the fact is that they can't write a balloon. It just shows you that they don't understand what Dodd-Frank is, and nor do the people they work with. And yeah, it's pretty amazing. And the other point is, if you look at it from the exemption side, someone would say, play devil's advocate, okay, well, let's just sell to investors. Well, your goal is to sell here for top dollar. Are investors, I mean, are the people on this call selling properties to each other if they're not wholesaling them? No. So that, it's not a matter of finding an investor to buy the house or doing fraud and saying that it is investor.
Right.
Our disclosure form covers your butt in that sense.
Cool.
So ability to repay, this is the big elephant in the room. This is why people do not qualify for mortgages. And this is, again, a huge takeaway. To the degree that you understand this and you understand what I'm about to tell you, you can really have a great handle on where we are now and where we're going. What the ability to repay says is that you can have, and again, there are some exemptions. Veterans Association is absolutely not affected by the ability to repay with Dodd-Frank. But the ability to repay says that 43% is your total back-end ratio. That means your mortgage, interest, car, credit, cards, debt, everything can go to 43%. So if you're making $10,000 a year, your total liabilities cannot exceed $4,300 a month. That means you need a 57% disposable income. Now, what do we know about Americans? We've had a negative savings rate for the last 12 years, 15 years. We know that people are not having disposable income of over 50%. This is what's fueling and driving this. This is the boss. This is what's driving the bus. The nice thing about seller financing is it still has to be underwritten, your transaction, but you can actually get around the ability to repay, and it creates a massive amount of flexibility. I'm not going to hammer and hang on this, but you guys can kick this around in your head and allow the learnings to arise that, realistically speaking, you can have a greater level of flexibility than the mortgage lenders that you're competing against to do transactions, because you can get people. I mean, how do you get someone into a home that is on vacation, or a permanent vacation, or quit their job and they've got a ton of money and they're not going to go back to work for 6 months, but they want to buy? Mm-hmm. I mean, what is B of A going to tell you? Great, come back and see us in 6 months. You got a pay raise in 6 weeks, and now your pay raise is going to qualify you for the mortgage. Fantastic, good. Congratulations. Come back and see us in 6 months. Well, not you guys. You guys can say, we can make that work. We can work with it. So there's a tremendous amount of flexibility here when understanding the fact that a seller finance transaction, unlike a traditional bank loan, is not subject. And this is kind of the one caveat, because a lot of people talk about the fact that the banks actually underwrote and wrote Dodd-Frank. It's interesting here because it's created a very clear advantage to do your deals above and beyond and compete with the big banks for buyers. So the problem is your forms, and a lot of people are going to say, well, for instance, our own California Association of Realtors, for instance, they have a seller finance addendum, and it's a 4-page form, and what it does is actually creates 13 to 14 CFPB, Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, which is the big head boss of Dodd-Frank, and it's nasty. We'll talk about it very shortly. It has up to 14 violations depending on what attorney is looking at it. So just by the fact of you having a buyer fill out the form, and in all likelihood your state form is probably not in compliance if the California Association of Realtors is not in compliance. And we've looked at Nevada, we've looked at Arizona, we've looked at all the forms, and they're just behind the ball of getting in line. Dodd-Frank has been in effect since January 10th of this year. We're 3 months into it, and the state forms and the forms that are out there, and by the way, Dodd-Frank is over 800 pages, so you could just be saying to yourself, yeah, I'm just going to go talk to my attorney about it. Well, be prepared to pay him. I don't know what he's going to charge you to read it, but I mean, our attorney actually read Dodd-Frank. He's the first one and only one that we've met.
It's not this guy in the picture, right?
So the point is here, cover your butt. Don't be caught. Don't there's an easy solution to all this, and the solution is just do clean deals. And that's something you can get excited about, is the fact that you're on this call. We have a great solution. We're not going to end this call with the whammy and say that you give us $5,000 and we're going to put you through our training program. We don't have a training program to sell. We don't have a license. We don't have a video series. We're not here to sell you anything. We're here to give you a solution and give you the edge. And the fact is, there are mortgage loan originators out there, we've looked at their forms, that are saying, yeah, I can do it. I can do your transaction because I'm a mortgage loan originator. Well, that's only half of the puzzle. You need to have compliant forms. And just to close this loop, the reason, and it's important to shed light on this, the reason why we are here where we're at, where people have the deer in the headlights and there's so much confusion about Dodd-Frank, is not just the fact that it's 800 pages and most attorneys are not going to read it, but because our industry is loaded, and I'm not a Democrat or Republican, neither is Terry or our company. We're registered independents, and what we are getting out there is what happened was the Republicans said they were going to repeal Dodd-Frank. So everyone in our industry, almost 80% of which were Republicans, they said, well, if they're just going to repeal it, then we don't need to get our ducks in a row. Well, we bet the other way. We said, what if it doesn't get repealed? And we know that the Obamacare Act has been the most unpopular piece of legislation over the last 30, 40, 50 years, depending on who you ask. It's been attacked over 50 times, and it's still there, still standing, not going anywhere. Same thing with Dodd-Frank. If you're sitting here thinking that it's just going to go away and you'll just stay away from this for a year until it gets repealed, well, I guess you have. There's certainly other illusions that you could have, and not too many that are bigger than that one. So this is not going anywhere. This arose, and the lack of people being ready for it and the lack of overall understanding for it is the fact that is that people didn't expect it to come. Well, it's here. So the CFPB under Dodd-Frank is God. It's a government cabinet level position set and created to enforce all consumer transactions, including mortgages. The penalty is the rescission of the note and interest forgiven. I'm going to actually go beyond that and say that it's actually payments. So you collect a down payment of 10, 20, 30% plus all payments up to the date of discovery of your violations. That is the penalty. And if you're a licensed individual, your license could be at risk in exposure as well. All because someone was looking for exemptions and trying to save paying some nominal fee that could otherwise be paid for by the buyer. And again, this is the solution. The solution is to get a mortgage loan originator. Get a mortgage loan originator that steps in the middle and does the deal just like you would have B of A do the deal, and covers your butt and make sure that everything's clean so that you can sleep at night. This is an investment, for crying out loud. Why wouldn't you want to make sure that your investment is top-notch and is not subject to investment risk? And again, if you're not creating an investment quality note, then you are subject to a heavy discount if you can get someone to buy your note. And this is a major, major, major issue. We're not here to sell our service. You guys can look into that. We're here to educate you. And there are mortgage loan originators. The power of our forms and a mortgage loan originator that's bright, that is willing to either learn or has the experience of seller financing and the knowledge of Dodd-Frank, that's how you are now in a position of baffling your competition. So, smile, feel good about it, and as you move forward, you can know that other people, more so than not, are in a position of feeling lost, confused, and isolated and powerless. So before we get into the sexy stuff, did you have something to throw in, Daniel?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Well, I was, and we can go through it at the end, but what I'd like to do is, at some point, I want to go through in more detail exactly what a mortgage loan originator does and what their role is for the people that have not heard that term.
You want to do it now or in the Q&A?
We can do it now. We can do it briefly, right? I mean, let's
Okay.
just go through it,
Sure.
right? So you're selling your property with seller financing. You're getting top dollar for your deal. You're selling it to an owner occupant. You're not doing an exempt transaction. You need to make sure that your loan meets all of the new, wonderful, super important, super helpful guidelines. And that you create a note that is compliant.
Yep.
You do it on your own, or you go hire what's called a mortgage loan originator, an MLO, and you can typically pass that cost on to the buyer, right? So
Yep.
what exactly does a mortgage loan originator do for the seller?
Sure. So basically, your mortgage loan originator, Daniel, you got a property at 123 Main Street, and you want to maximize your resale value because seller financing has been proven to sell properties for 15% more, especially in the lower price point markets. The lower the price point, the more you can attach a premium onto the resale value. So you come to me and you say, I want to sell my property for a premium. I don't want to pay closing costs for the buyer, and I don't want to repair it, and I just kind of want to flip it. And what we're going to say is, all right, we can certainly do it. Our obligation is to qualify your buyer. So we're going to do basically the disclosures. That's really the key. We've talked about that already. Your disclosures have to comply with Dodd-Frank. We have yet to see a state form that actually does. So your disclosures need to be in compliance with Dodd-Frank. You have to qualify, meaning you have to underwrite the buyer. You have to...
Now hold on, Mark. My disclosures, are they state-specific or are they federal forms?
Dodd-Frank's a federal law, as you know, which means you have to comply with it at the federal level. Now, that being said, if your forms, let's say you're in an exempt scenario, then your forms, your state would typically, even though you're not subject to Dodd-Frank at the federal level, your forms at the state level would be subject to whatever the state laws are, which are very close in a lot of these cases. Of course, each state's going to vary to Dodd-Frank. So again, I mean, if you're in compliance with Dodd-Frank, unless you're in a weird state that is some weird, has some weird law, typically, and again, we're talking Dodd-Frank, which is at the federal level. That's really the granddaddy of them all that you want to comply with.
If I can interject in here a little bit, Mark.
Yeah, please.
Because we just finished a deal that's a perfect example. Is basically, as a seller, you're the bank, so you're creating a new loan, and you need to create a collateral file. You have to identify if the buyer is a consumer or an investor. And then a loan application needs to be taken, a credit report pulled, if both parties are interested, an appraisal on the property, good faith estimate delivered. It's basically anything that a lender would do on a regular loan needs to be part of a seller finance transaction now. It's not just going to escrow or your closing table and saying, and having escrow draw a note and deed of trust and say, here we are. You're creating a file, for lack of a better word, that gives the buyer's situation the way they stand in that moment. Now, if you have a balloon payment that you're creating, that's where the ability to repay comes in. Where let's say if the balloon's in 5 years and the buyer says, you know what, I'm getting a settlement in 5 years and I'll be able to pay this off. If not, I'll refinance it. So all these items need to be addressed in the situation just as if it was a regular loan from Bank of America, and then that information needs to be delivered to the seller for their approval because they're the bank. And so it's a process. It's not only documents, it's a process, and it's like doing a loan. And this collateral file gives the note value, so that if it's discounted in the future, it's going to have the most value that's possible, because the purchaser of that note will have all of the information when the note was originated.
They'll have the file. The file basically travels with the note.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
And
that's an important point, Terry.
Yeah. And the other thing to look for is there's guys that have written notes and done notes for, $100, $200, whatever, and they've done, just writing notes for people over the last 10, 15, 20, 30 years, whatever. And it's amazing because we hear this a lot. Well, I've got my guy that writes my note, and we always ask, is he a mortgage loan originator? No, he's just some guy, escrow, whatever. Well, if you're the seller of this, the Auschwitz defense is not applicable. You cannot just say, I just work here. You are by default liable here. And even if someone, so you need to check and make sure the person you're working with that's writing your note is actually an NMLO. It's just it doesn't, there's no, you have no excuse. It's as simple as that. So
guys,
Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say I see all your questions come through, guys. We're gonna hit all of your questions at the end, so you can keep typing them into the chat box, but just don't get frustrated if we're not answering them right now. We'll get through all of the questions in a few minutes once we do the Q&A. Go ahead, Terry.
Okay, so one last thing that I think is really important, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I think there's a reason why this was all created. And the S.A.F.E Act created the NMLS, and so what that did was created a registry so that loan officers have to report quarterly every loan that they've funded, and also every loan that they've taken, just an application, not even funded. And so the government's tracking through the NMLS registry every single type of loan, that is out there, even servicers, payday loans. It's all part of the whole picture. And I believe that they made the exemptions so few and so hard to, or so where a seller shouldn't even want to have an exemption, that they just want to go out and hire an MLO. It's because it's because they want to know all this stuff, and I think they even want the IRS to know who's getting interest income, and that's a way of tracking it.
Yeah, I'm glad you added that. We are in Big Brother, so you can complain about it, you can cry about it, but this is where we are. Did we close that loop appropriately, Daniel?
I think yes.
Okay.
Yes, we did. And there are questions that people have typed in, so we'll go through those questions, because I think there's still some unanswered stuff there, but that takes care of my question.
Okay, perfect. So this is a deal that we were working on, and this goes, when we hit the rewind button and go back to one of the first questions you asked about why and how it's hard to present to a seller why they should accept this. Well, this is a property that we came across in San Diego. It's a property that, after discovery of it, we found needed almost $100,000 worth of repairs. The fair market on it is $450 to $500, depending on how much was going to be put in it. We're not interested in pumping a bunch of money into a property. That's not really our thing. We're not interested in putting $100,000 of repairs into a property. And realistically, a lot of people think the same. And if this is you, you're going to really like this. So you see the numbers. This is what we're looking at. And of course, an investor offers were coming in at well lower than $350,000. This was actually coming in at 450 in terms of the resale buyer that we found. We found someone that needed seller financing. And again, when you do seller financing and you're doing it as a flip, you're kind of working both sides of the fence. So, in our right hand, we found a guy that loved the property. Property has a, sort of an ocean view. It's on a cul-de-sac, so it had a lot of upside. It, big, had some big square footage, and we came in and we put in an offer for 350 because all of the competitors were coming in at 320, 300, due to the condition of the property. So we came in, we gave them basically another 10%, and we were talking about this as a competitive advantage to beat out your competitors. And the question is here, why fix and flip when we can do something like this, bringing in a consumer buyer? The contract price actually came in at $437,500 with 30% down payment. And again, a lot of people think 30%, that's 126,000, something like that. Well, why wouldn't you just get a loan? Well, this guy, and there's a lot of people in your market that just don't qualify for financing. So at an 8%, 30 due in 5, we attached a 5-year balloon to it. And we can certainly sell it for cash. We're going to show you the different options that you can take with it. And again, we're avoiding capital gains, which on this particular scenario would peel away 30% of the profit. So we came in at 350. We showed them 100,000. We told them they're not going to get 450 for their property. We'll give them effectively full price. And this is what we're teaching you guys how to do, is how to give effective full price on properties that need repairs and you don't want to do repairs. And this works awesome, the lower the purchase price, because the bigger the premium you can attach to it on the resale. So
nice.
we came in, and we're coming in at a 30% collected down payment, leaving $218,000 in the deal. We have a payment at 8% of $2247, and when we look at a 60-month internal rate of return, we're at 17.4%. And we could sell the note after 3 payments, giving the note investor a yield of 12 to 15%. So day 61, we would collect a payment at closing, collect a payment on day 30, collect a payment on day 60. Daniel, you talked about seasoning a note. This gives us a little bit of seasoning. Day 61, we're selling it, and we're taking a profit of $49,276. That is an option. So decent rate of return to the note investor at 12%. And, we had a great annual rate of return without doing any rehab. We just had to sit on a note for 61 days. We still flipped it, but we flipped it without holding the actual property and holding title for those 61 days or however long of days it normally takes you to hang on to a property. And by the way, I just want to add some color to this. This is Jack Sternberg's model. This is, as he says it, this is my business model. And, if you go to the Noteworthy Convention, I saw him present this, and my head literally spun around 3 or 4 times. My eyeballs popped out of my head. I sat there in lunch, and I went back and I asked him probably 4 or 5, 6 times different questions, picking his brain. He charges $28,000 to teach you guys how to do this. And I respect him, and I respect the information he brings to the industry. So I don't see this as any disrespect to him that I'm just giving away his secrets. I figured all this out. We figured out all of this out ourselves, and this is an actual.
Sternberg charges 28 grand
for his private coaching. Yeah.
Oh man, no, he's a sharp guy. I had dinner with him 2 weeks ago in Tampa. He's been around the block for a long time. So.
Yeah. Well. He's not very available too, unless you go to his convention. So, and it's worth going to his convention to just learn how to do this, because when you talk and think about baffling your competition, we beat every seasoned investor that does 10, 12 deals a month out, that they could not buy this and figure out how to do this. And this is what's awesome, and this is what you guys can get absolutely excited about. So when
this
we talk
is
about,
cool. I like this deal structure.
Yeah, and there's a great software to figure all this out. So when we talk about better, safer, smarter real estate, we can sell the note in 60 months, and it's kind of like a buy and hold. And obviously the note is subject to a lower discount. We can sell it at 12 months, 6 months, 24 months, whatever Baskin-Robbins flavor of the month you want to do. You can do it and make it work and make it give you great numbers. And here are the numbers here. I'm not going to itemize them. You can see them for yourself, and they're obvious. And when we talk about better, safer, smarter real estate, we're just talking about doing deals where we baffle the competition at lower risk. And of course, this presupposes that you're doing your deals in compliance. You're doing Dodd and creating Dodd-Frank notes. And that pretty much gets us to the end and the top of the hour. We kept it at 60 minutes, so we kept our word. And before we jump into the Q&A, and we just want to direct your attention to a couple resources. Our disclosure link is dodd-franknotes.com. That gets you one of the critical CYA Dodd-Frank disclosures that you need to absolutely put into your closing package if you are selling with seller financing. And I would recommend doing it across the board. This is a free download. You just go to that page. We just put that up for this particular call. It's a new disclosure that we have. It will be revised very soon because there's some new legislation in this constantly twisting and changing space that we're in. And we will, this is direct from our attorney. This is an attorney who's actually read Dodd-Frank, and it's a cool thing. He lets us give it out, and this is one of the needed disclosures that you will need to put in your package. And then finally, Seller Finance Pros. You can get, there's some downloads there on strategies. And then, of course, if you want some more information, you can email us. We'll send you our presentation. The email is there. You can call us if you want to discuss services or consulting. We have some more downloads on sellerfinanceconsultants.com. There's a great myths download that you can get there. There's some audios that Terry and I just kind of recorded off the cuff. They're not the greatest quality. And I think we're going to have an advanced strategy PDF coming out pretty soon. So that's really it. That's the whole kit and caboodle.
Yeah, this is great, guys. I appreciate it. For all of you listening, go to the first site. Go to dodd-franknotes.com. You're going to enter your name and email, which puts you on these guys' mailing list, and you want to be on their mailing list because they're sharp. They clearly know this niche, right? They obviously understand what they're talking about, and so use them as a resource. Now, the form that you're going to get on that website, absolutely free, is great, but also you should reach out to Mark and Terry. I mean, if you're doing seller financing, you want people on your team that can guide you through it. So help me understand something, Mark. You guys act as MLOs in just in California, or are you licensed nationally now?
Well, we pretty much have decided, at least as of late, that we're going to operate in the West Coast states in terms of origination, in terms of our origination services of California, the states that our attorneys in, California, Nevada, Oregon, Washington, and Arizona, those 5 states. But your MLO, and interview a few of them, get one that gets it, get one that has either been around seller financing or is willing to learn. Certainly smart guys will be able to figure this out. You know, if you don't read, obviously you're not going to figure anything out, and there's definitely resources like we have on our site that you can figure it out. So that you can buy our forms and give them to your MLO. We actually have a note network where we buy, and we're only in the seller finance space. Please don't call us for non-performing notes if we can get a buyer or want to buy those, or performing notes or whatever. No disrespect. If you're in that space, great, and you're doing well. But we focus and stay in seller financing, and that's our niche. That's what we do. And if you have and you're originating seller finance notes, we can liquidate your seller finance notes with the seasoning that we showed you at a very small discount. We will only buy seller finance notes using our forms because, as I mentioned early on, like Grammy says, if you lay down with dogs, you get up with fleas, and we are not going to be buying bad, stinky paper. as our attorney says.
Hey, Mark, it looks like your VA took that page down because Dodd-Frank notes is not coming up.
Oh wow.
So what's an email address that people can email you at, and you can email them the form and they can get in contact with you. Let's do it that way.
The email right there. info@sellerfinanceconsultants.com.
So guys, shoot an email to info@sellerfinanceconsultants.com, and Mark and Terry will email you a copy of the form, and then their main website is sellerfinanceconsultants.com. They have a bunch of information there. Is there a place there where they can join your mailing list as well?
Yeah, on either sellerfinancepros.com or sellerfinanceconsultants.com, you can download, and when you download the documents, and you will want to download, there's really good stuff. The audio quality is not good, but it is content more on helping you get started. There's 3 different downloads that you can get, and at that point you would get on our mailing list.
Okay, so guys, so instead of going to Dodd-Frank notes, go to Seller Finance Pros, and shoot these guys an email at info@sellerfinanceconsultants.com as well. Let's go through the Q&A, and guys, I'm going to take questions in the order in which you type them. So if I haven't gotten to you yet, don't get frustrated. We're going in the exact order in which these questions were typed. So let's start at the very beginning. Let's see. Let's go to my question first, because I took a couple of notes, and that's that's the beauty of being me and moderating this webinar is I get to ask questions first. So, actually,
Daniel, just so you know the format we're doing here, Terry's gonna lead, and I'm gonna chime in where appropriate. So we're switching chairs here.
I'm ready.
So I just want to clarify one thing, because you guys keep saying you're avoiding capital gains, right? So let's clarify that. Let's clarify for everyone why selling with seller financing allows you to, and really instead of saying avoid, we should say defer. Correct? We're deferring capital gains.
That's correct. And what you're creating is an installment sale. Treatment, and I'm not a CPA. However, cashing out with a low basis, you're gonna have taxes in the year that you cash out for your gain, based on whatever additional income that gives you for that year. So if you can create an installment sale where you have an amortizing loan that is amortizing, over 5 years. With a balloon in 5 years, then you'll end up, maybe you can structure your tax life so that you minimize your taxes in that 5th year when you get the bulk of that capital gains that's going to come to you. But during the 5 years, you could be amortizing a loan. The beauty of this is you can create a note that's principal only. And structure a, maybe you get a really good sales price on the house, 20% above what it should sell for all day long. But maybe you're carrying a note with 1% interest or whatever the minimum that the IRS requires, and you can turn around and extend your capital gains over the life of the loan and avoid taxes that way. You can talk to a CPA and you can structure anything you want as a seller to benefit your financial life. And that's the beauty of not dealing with a bank. Right.
And guys, as a disclosure, we're not CPAs. Get a good CPA on your team. And your CPA will guide you through this. But yes, selling with seller financing allows you to defer your capital gains, which is pretty important. If it's still not clear to anyone, just type into the chat box. Jay,
and then Daniel, just because this is important, to add a little one piece of color to that, this is basically a way more flexible 1031 exchange. You don't have to go buy another property to defer your capital gains, in the 6-month period. and you don't have to go buy a like for like, running up your basis. And it's not restricted to investment properties only. So, it's just a way more flexible 1031 exchange, and it's good to know that, whether you're an accountant or you're not.
Cool. Jay Jacobson wants to know, does the 3-loan exemption apply to vacant recreation land sales?
Land sales would be considered an investment. You're not going to occupy there's no structure on it, so you're free to do whatever you want.
Okay. Let's see. Who's next? Andrew, how does this apply to multiple note closes? For example, if you do an 80-20, is this still? Well, it still applies the same way, right? I mean, you're just doing first and second.
Yeah, it'd be I would. That's a good question, and that I've never had. My assumption would be that it's per transaction, not just writing an 80-10-10 or whatever.
So one transaction, no matter how many loans there, counts as one transaction, even if you've got multiple loans.
Yeah, because it's one collateral file that's going, it's to each loan. But again, I didn't write the law, and it just makes sense that it would be per transaction, not per note, and that's what I've read. And I've read Dodd-Frank. Title 10 and 14 are the ones that have to do with real estate. I've read Dodd-Frank, all 800 pages 2 or 3 times. And,
oh my God! So sorry,
14,
Terry.
Yeah, I know. In 30 years of real estate, I always thought law was really boring, and I'd follow. This really intrigued me, how it was written and what's behind it and who wrote it and the S.A.F.E Act. It just, for some reason, it just kind of got to me, and I had to figure it out.
Well, that's fantastic. The world needs people like you, because somebody's got to read it and figure out what the hell is going on.
Well, I was reading it for opportunity, so I'm saying there's got to be a way to make money here, and just trying to understand it was my goal.
Well, good for you. I'm glad you did it. Better you than me. So Andrew is also asking, are proper licensed MLOs sticking to one state, or are there good MLOs doing cross-border work? So
the licensing is per state. I'm licensed in California. Our attorney is licensed in the other 4 states, and so if depending on what state you're the seller and the notes being written, you need an MLO that's licensed in that state.
Mm-hmm.
And get a good one. Please get a good one.
And again, you can pass the cost of that to your buyer, right? So don't try to save on the first MLO that comes along. Find a good one, pass that cost on to your buyer.
Yeah, it's like finding a good broker. They're worth the commission that they're going to earn, for making you money.
And it's less than doing a loan. So your buyer, who, by the way, doesn't have, it's the only game in town. Your buyer doesn't have an option. Your buyer's more than happy to pay their fee. So, and their fee actually invariably is less than they would be paying even if they were to go through a bank. So. Mm-hmm. From however angle you look at it, everyone wins.
Makes sense. James Smith is asking, what is the percentage range of prices the seller gets when he sells? His owner will carry. I'm not sure I understand the question. Is it considered to be discounted paper rather than premium paper? I'm not sure. Does that question make sense, guys?
Yeah, it does.
Well,
okay.
Go ahead, Mark, because I don't understand it wholly, other than I know you can get, if there's 30% more buyers out there that you're adding to the pool of buyers that don't qualify and that would love to own a home, you're going to get a premium on the price of your home, and you're going to have fewer repairs, repair requests and things like that during escrow, and a happier buyer. Costs of the loan We've done some scenarios where, if you go get an FHA loan, you've got a 1 3/4% origination fee, you've got probably 2 to 3 points or you got 1 3/4 mortgage insurance, you got 2 to 3 points PMI or loan origination fee, and then you've got I think a 3/4% and monthly insurance fee on top of the payment. You're increasing the interest rate on your FHA mortgage by, let's say, 2 to 2.5%, and you could have all of your down payment go towards a seller finance deal and pay 2% more and probably still come out equal. We've done those numbers, and it's phenomenal how it works.
So James, hopefully that answers your question. That makes sense. Lacey is asking who is responsible for holding or keeping the original signed documents.
If they go to the seller, it's a collateral file that basically is just like a bank. When they do a loan, they've got a storage vault, hopefully, where they keep the note and deed of trust and all the supporting documentation. I've bought some notes from banks, distressed notes, and I get their collateral files. And I have to say I'm pretty proud that we do a better collateral file than banks do.
And so when the seller goes and sells the note, he passes that file on and the original docs to the note buyer.
Correct. After a series of other things are done, but that's the crux of it. Yeah, the seller or the holder of the note keeps the collateral file. And what you're doing when you create the collateral file is you're protecting yourself from the buyer. In the Dodd-Frank Act, the buyer has all the power, or the control or whatever. If they feel they've been wronged, the first place they're going to go to is an attorney and find out how they can get out of that deal. And if it wasn't done right, that's going to be one of the ways that they're going to try to get out of it.
Gotcha.
And make no mistake, these attorneys are lining up, licking their chops with respect to this particular act, and we've seen the numbers. A lot of them are wanting to get into doing this as contingency work because the penalties in the teeth in this law are
nasty.
Don't get caught with your pants down.
Like the guy in the picture.
Yeah.
Your attorney. No, I'm just kidding. Ralph is asking who decides if the buyer qualifies or not.
That's a good question, and the law doesn't say that there's certain guidelines that have to be followed as far as qualifying goes. What Mark was talking about in the slides was the QM, which is called a qualified mortgage, with the 43% or 47%, and so when you're doing a seller finance transaction, there's no set in stone guidelines. It's what makes sense to the buyer, and then it's disclosed to the seller, and the seller says, hey, this guy has, some lates. He's got a 600 FICO, but you know what? Something happened, and he lost his job, and now he has another one. All this stuff that used to be explainable, and you used to be able to get loans for. Not so much, the breathing in the mirror loans, but something that sounds reasonable. And he's got a lot of money to put down, 20%, and if it makes sense, it's up to the seller to decide.
So the MLO is the one that usually will qualify the buyer and then go through the vetting process, passes the information on to the seller. The seller decides if the buyer qualifies, but there's no strict guidelines.
Right. The MLO takes the information, puts it in a format that's accepted by the industry. Your loan application is called a 1003, your good faith estimate, potentially an appraisal, and verifies income, assets, maybe a tax return, to show the ratios and give the information to the seller, and the seller makes the decision All you're doing as an MLO is you're reporting to the registry quarterly, and you're getting good information so the seller can make a decision.
I got you. Okay. Cool. Let's keep going. We got a lot of questions, guys. So that means people are paying attention. I'm seeing a lot of smart questions here. And that's, that's typical of my subscribers because they're smarter than everyone else. And
That's awesome.
they ask better questions, and they do more deals, and they're just generally way sexier. All right. Does the DFA Jill Healy? How are you, Jill? Does the DFA apply to a private loan to an LP that owns a property, that owns single-family houses and investment?
Yes, if the buyer is a consumer, meaning that they're going to live in it, or a relative, go back to, it's the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau. It's the Financial Reform Act. It's a consumer-oriented law. Investors are totally exempt, whether it's land or a single family or apartments. If the buyer, the test, and that's what we gave away, is the test document where if the buyer is going to live in the house and owner occupy it at any time, then it falls under the Dodd-Frank Act. And it doesn't matter if the seller is an LLC, a corporation, an individual. That's not the test. The test is the owner occupancy.
Makes sense. Jill, hopefully that clears it up for you. Franco, yes, we will have a replay. I will email it out sometime in the next few days. We'll make the replay available. Unless we have unforeseen technical difficulties, which every once in a while does happen. That's why you got to attend my webinars live when I have them, because you may not get a replay, but we'll try. Marsha, can you write your own note if you are an MLO? Good question. So if you're a licensed MLO, can you write your own note?
I would say absolutely. There, you just need to follow what the guidelines are, and the key is that the buyer understands the terms of the note and the terms of the agreement, and that the Dodd-Frank Act is followed as far as the ability to repay goes to a certain extent, and that the loan makes sense.
Cool. Okay. Melissa wants to know, what should the buyer expect to pay in terms of MLO fees, typically?
That's a good question.
That's a good one also. We've set our fee at $14.95, a flat fee, and $3.95 for processing, just like a regular loan processor. And if appraisal is required, then that would be an additional fee that the buyer or the seller would pay for. And all these are negotiable to either the buyer or the seller, or if there's an agent involved with commissions, they can be split up however there's no one party that needs to pay everything. The way we framed it is, if it's the buyer's going to benefit probably the most out of this, that they're the ones that can pay the fee, but there's really no rule or anything set in stone. There is one. Certain states have limitations on the points and fees that can be charged under the Dodd-Frank Act, and they range from 3 to 5% of the loan amount. So depending on the state you're in, you need to check for what those rules are.
Okay.
And keep this in perspective as well. If you're worried about what the buyer's paying, the buyer is accustomed to paying for loan fees. On every other transaction, they pay loan fees. So that's one thing that we always sit here and scratch our heads about, is why people worry about a fee that in a lot of cases is less than what the buyer would already pay to begin with, and as well for a buyer that doesn't have a choice.
Gotcha. Okay. Let's see who's next, and we gotta crank through these pretty quickly, guys, because we're gonna at some point run out of time.
Okay.
Let's see. VJ, seller selling their home has to be free and clear. No, no. So VJ is asking if you're selling your home with seller financing, does it have to be free and clear?
The answer is no. There are some other things you need to watch out for. If there's an underlying loan, it may have an acceleration clause or a due on sale clause. Both, that's an additional disclosure that needs to be made by the MLO in that case, and the parties. They need to understand the ramifications of that. But those aren't illegal transactions. Also, a lease option or lease purchase. Any of those transactions are considered, well, not the lease option, but a lease purchase, need to be a Dodd-Frank compliant transaction.
Let's see. Joe Chadwick, is there any recourse if they do not pass regulations? Yeah, I think we've touched on that. If Joe, you're asking if you create a seller financing transaction that does not meet the requirements, is there recourse? Yeah, these guys touched on the penalties involved if they find it. It's not pretty. Steve Gallagher, is vacant land exempt from Dodd-Frank? I think you guys already touched on that, correct?
Yep.
Yes, it's exempt.
Okay. Land is exempt. Bonnie and Beverly Moss say, I'm baffled, never mind my competition. Bonnie and Beverly are awesome, by the way. Bonnie and Beverly, because Bonnie and Beverly are great, and they're always on together. I don't know how, you guys must be like the best of friends ever. I've never seen Bonnie and Beverly on a webinar, like just Bonnie or just Beverly. You guys must be like BFF to ninth degree. That's awesome. Yeah, guys, let me know if you have questions. I know you're baffled, but if we'll be happy to answer your questions. Elizabeth Nichols, can note flipping be done when you're buying subject to the existing mortgage? Can note flipping be done when you're buying subject to?
Yeah, I guess you'd probably have to find a pretty savvy note buyer in that case. But we've talked about being able to take a property this is really kind of getting out of the box, a property that's upside down. Let's say, it's worth 100 and the note's 110. Let's say it was modified 4 years ago at 2%, and it's amortizes over 40 years, and they, did some, why can't you take over that note, or wrap it at a higher interest rate that gives you some spread on the rate, and then sell the spread, to an investor that might, want a really high return. There's no limit to what you can do as long as the buyer and seller understands the transaction and it's fully disclosed, so that you can't come back later and say you didn't know.
Right.
Yeah, and this is why we put together a note builder package to sell to people, so that they could be in control when they go to resell their notes. I mean, it doesn't make any sense to go to all this effort and have a garbage note to sell that's going to be highly discounted or non-marketable.
Right. Okay, let's keep moving, guys. This is great. Dwayne says, did I hear earlier that buying and selling notes are affected by DFA? Yeah.
Absolutely.
It absolutely is, Dwayne. Sherry wants to see the seller benefits slide again. Would you guys mind scrolling back up to the seller benefits slide?
You got that, Mark?
Yeah.
All right. In the meantime, Clyde, yes, they are in California. So if you're originating, or if you need to originate mortgages in California, you should get with these guys to be your MLO. Absolutely.
Actually,
and again, you guys are not just, you said you're not just in California, correct? West Coast?
Arizona, Nevada, Oregon,
Washington.
Washington.
Right.
And
So
I'd have to say the people that are on the call, we'll answer your questions. Just give us a call, and if it's going to be a 10-minute, 15-minute answer, that we can point you in the right direction or just give you some good advice that's free and that's what it's worth. Give us a call. We're more than happy to answer those questions.
Yeah, we definitely like to help, and we're a resource.
yeah, you definitely use these guys as a resource. Um, who is next? Bonnie and Beverly said great content, and I'm sure everybody else shares that opinion. Dave, it says it's my understanding balloons are not allowed per Dodd-Frank. So Dave, we touched on that. You can do balloons, but you just have to create compliant transactions, compliant notes.
You need an MLO to have a balloon.
You need a mortgage loan originator. Cynthia says I will definitely have to go over this to grasp it, but my question is, do you have to have your own money to do this? Well, I think it depends on what you're looking to do, Cynthia.
Yeah.
If there are situations where you can buy with seller financing and then resell it with seller financing and not put money in, right? I mean, and there are situations that you can create where you can do this without your own money. I mean, you can leverage other people's money. It's got to be more specific, Cynthia. I mean, there are situations where you can do transactions without your own money. Will Hardy, how serious is the quarterly MCR reports that are completed by the MLO?
They're federal law.
Well, there you
They're
go.
absolutely serious, and if you don't report, you're going to probably lose your license as an MLO. I don't know what the exact guidelines are for that, but you don't want to mess around with the federal government.
You do not want to mess around with the federal government. What was that? What was that movie? I'm gonna go on a tangent for like 3 seconds here. I think there was Wolf of Wall Street. If you guys saw Wolf of Wall Street, where at the end he's sitting in a room with federal prosecutors, and one of them really kind of like condescendingly says, "Well, this case is a Granada," and Leonardo DiCaprio's character says, "What the hell is that?" And the guy goes, "Well, you remember back in the 80s when we invaded Granada? It was United States military invading this little island. You can't lose. That's how tight of a case we have against you." That's that's what happens when the feds prosecute you. You're pretty much always going to lose. So you do not want to mess with the feds. That was a great flick. If you haven't seen Wolf of Wall Street, it could have been shorter by about 45 minutes. They could have edited it down, but it was a hilarious movie. Frenchie Benjamin, what about the lawsuit happy buyers who sue to collect previous 1 to 3 years of payment under Dodd-Frank just because they can? Well, that's why you got to protect yourself and get an MLO and make sure that your transactions are compliant, right?
Right. They're consumer-driven laws. However, I recall reading in some of the legal jargon that even a note that's done and it's not compliant, if it's attempted to be corrected later on, there's forgiveness in it. So I think they're looking for the real bad guys. They're not looking for someone that makes an honest mistake.
Right. Or at least you hope so.
Yeah.
Well, they already made example out of a company in Texas, and they're going to be looking. The way they get people to take notice and comply here is getting people to be made example out of, and all it takes is a single report. You can go to the CFPB website and file a complaint. It's basically an anonymous window that you just throw a complaint in. We know a loan officer actually that just filed a complaint against another loan officer who was stealing his business from doing kickbacks to the real estate agents. And he said, you know what, I'm just tired of this guy beating me out by being illegal. I'm just going to file a report with the CFPB. Now, I know none of you guys are doing kickbacks. I'm just illustrating a point how easy it is to get turned in, and you piss off the wrong person, even doing something innocent, and an innocent mistake, it's possible.
Absolutely. Al Cook. Hey, Al, how are you? Says, can you put up the slide that showed the whole process? So, Mark, would you mind going back to that
Sure.
that diagram?
Yeah.
Let's see. Kurt S. Is that Kurt Smith? Hey, Kurt. In Indiana, the AG and the courts take a dim view on installment sales, which makes things iffy in terms of seller financing or lease options. So that's more of a comment.
Well, I'd have to say, though, how do you define an installment sale? Because a mortgage is an installment sale, or it's an installment vehicle. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm not in Indiana, so that's for an MLO to figure out there, I guess.
Yeah, another reason to consult with your MLO that has experience in this space.
It sounds too
in that
restricting for a real estate transaction. You could call it something else. Call it a lease option, and then it's not an installment sale. I mean, there's ways. I don't know. Sometimes the politicians create more problems, obviously, than they solve.
Sometimes. Oh, Terry,
How about
come on.
all the time?
That was an
Exactly.
understatement of the century. Sometimes. Oh man. You're way too kind to the politicians.
Yeah, there you go.
A bunch of people are typing the same question. So again, just so there's no confusion, a lot of you guys are saying, I thought you said we couldn't use balloons anymore with Dodd-Frank. No, you can use balloons. You can create seller financing transactions with balloons, but a mortgage loan originator has to put that transaction together.
Yeah, the way the law is written, they're written to define the exemptions. So if you're just a homeowner and you want to sell your home and get income from selling your home, you can write a balloon even with one loan. If you're doing 3 or less than 3 or up to 3, you can't be a corporation, you can't have built the house, you can't have a balloon, or you can't write a balloon. But you can hire an MLO, and you can be a corporation. You can have a balloon. You can have an adjustable loan. So hiring an MLO is the gateway to create a transaction the way you want it to be.
There you go, guys. Just so that should clear it up for everybody. You can do balloons. That's the bottom line. You can.
Yes.
Can. Yes, we can.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I couldn't help myself. It's my webinar. It's my webinar, and I can make fun of certain politicians if I want to. That's.
And I hate to sound like a broken record, but you heard me say this before. Get a good MLO, please.
And
Not be stated enough.
absolutely. And if you're in the West Coast, then use Mark and Terry. A bunch of people were still typing that the link doesn't work. So guys, again, to get in touch with Mark and Terry, Mark, go ahead and scroll back down to the slide with your websites. The first website link will not work, but you can go to sellerfinancepros.com. You can also email these guys. And again, use them as a resource. If you have questions, get in touch with them. If you're in the West Coast if you're putting these transactions together, you use their services. They're good guys to know, and they're clearly very knowledgeable. Send an email to info@sellerfinanceconsultants.com, and they'll email you the disclosure form that they're giving to everybody that attended this webinar. Let's crank through, guys, another 10 minutes, okay, and then we'll wrap this up. So let's crank through as many questions as we can. And everybody, I'm still going through questions in the same exact order in which they were typed in, so hopefully we can get to you. Let's see, who is next? I lost my spot. Um, Elizabeth Nichols, can you do another 3 exempt transactions in a different entity?
No, it follows the person or the owner, and if the owner of the LLC is John Smith, then and he has 5 LLCs, he can't do 3 in every LLC. It's 3 period, and I don't know how they're gonna monitor that. However, it's the federal government again.
Yeah.
Uh,
Okay, well that's fine,
so
Terry. Let's crank through these quickly. So the bottom line
okay,
is that no, you can't. It's 3 and that's it. Even if you do
yep.
even if you try to do them in multiple LLCs.
In a 12-month period, forward or backwards.
Right. Okay. Clyde wants to know, how do you vet a good MLO? That's a good question.
Great question.
I haven't found very many that understand this. Gosh, I don't know. Have them, find one and then have them give us a call and see if they understand what's going on. We're looking at.
We would love to have one in every state that we'll approve them.
This is all new. This is like creating.
Wild Wild West.
Yeah, it's all brand new. Maybe out of these types of seminars, we'll create a whole network of MLOs that we could put on our website and refer to people in the individual states. I mean, who knows where this could go.
A lot of you guys are asking what are the MLO fees. So again, for an example, you can go to Seller Finance Pros and you can, or actually, what's the better? Should they go to Seller Finance Consultants? And they can see a list of your fees there. And I guess your fees are typical, fairly typical of an MLO in other states? Or no?
That's a good question. We're charging $14.95 for a compliant transaction. It's up to whatever someone feels their time is worth or their knowledge. As much or as little. Could be a point of the loan amount, or I'm really not sure.
So there's no standard fees, right? There's
no
among MLOs. Okay. Sydney is asking, do we use title companies to close these transactions? So
absolutely, it's a normal transaction any other way. Escrow, title, closing, attorney, whatever your state requires.
Okay. Marcia is asking, is there a problem in the future for the seller if he approves a low credit score?
Well, if the buyer defaults, then they have the remedy of foreclosure.
Barbara Calloway, I'm also a real estate agent. Retiring client wants to sell his present place and buy a smaller place. Should he do it seller financing? It's hard to sell current property with 28 acres. So yeah, he may be able to find more buyers, Barbara, if he is open to selling it with seller financing. He can expand his buyer pool.
From my understanding, you can't get any kind of a conforming loan under over 4 or 5 acres.
Right.
So really?
That would be the only way, either cash or seller financing.
Wow, I didn't know that. All right, we're getting to the finish line here, guys. Ralph Florence, can you violate? And by the way, Mark and Terry, I really appreciate you guys sticking around this long and going through all these questions.
Our pleasure.
We've been at it for almost 2 hours here, so I really do appreciate it. Ralph wants to know, can you violate the new law by approving the seller that quote unquote they determined shouldn't have been approved? So there's no clear guidelines on the approval process, right? So
I think there is none, and probably some case law is going to have to determine that. You just want it to be clean and common sense.
Okay. Jerome, as an investor, if I'm seller financing properties to the tune of $3 a month, must I become a mortgage loan originator, and how would I avoid dealer status?
You're not going to avoid dealer status and just hire someone to do it, because probably you're going to be making more money on your business model, however you've created it. Hire someone to do it and create a program.
I mean, I guess Jerome could become an MLO, but what's the point if you can pass on that cost to the seller, or I mean to the buyer, right? Jerome, yeah, I mean, you could go through the trouble of becoming a mortgage loan originator, but why not hire one and just pass that, make the buyer pay that fee, right? There's really no huge benefit to you becoming an MLO because you're not paying for those costs anyway. Your buyer is.
Plus, you have E&O insurance. If an MLO is doing a volume of it, their costs are going to be less than your. You may even not even be able to get it because you're a dealer. And creating your own deals, you probably can't even insure the transaction.
Okay. Bonnie and Beverly, and they already left the webinar. Bonnie and Beverly said we're twins. That clears up so much for me.
Wow.
They're twins. They're literally on every webinar, and they're clients of ours, and they use our software, and they've actually bought our bank elimination blueprint course, and they're always together. Twins. That's awesome. Okay. Eric Johnson, if the standard is, and by the way, guys, Sternberg says hi. I texted him. I let him know I'm doing a webinar with you, and he
that's awesome.
he says hello.
That's great.
He's a character. I love Sternberg. Yeah. Eric Johnson says, if the standard is based on the buyer, then what is the standard for investors' purchase and or managed property investments with a consumer type seller? That's a mouthful. Does that make sense, guys? If the standard is based on the buyer, the consumer, then what's the standard for investors who purchase investment property?
Well, investors are exempt, so the question is kind of reversing it. If you're buying a home from, let's say, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, and they're retiring, and they want to sell you their house and carry the loan, and you're an investor, it's an exempt transaction. There is no, you're done. Just go to escrow and close the deal.
Cool. Okay. Are lease options exempt? Steve Gallagher.
Great question.
They're not. They're exempt, but we've been told to be careful. See, you can do a lease option and then record it to cloud the title. To kind of so that the seller doesn't go, put a new loan on it behind the lease option. When you start creating a cloud on the title, I think it would be looked at as more of a sale than it would be a lease with an option, out there sometime in the future. So it's gray, and you can get away probably without having to hire an MLO. Just do a lease with an option. So be careful.
I want to cover our own assets here and say that every attorney we've talked to has said to get an MLO, and so I'd like to leave our punctuation point on that.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, guys, let's do 3 more questions really quick, and then we're going to need to wrap it up. And if anybody still does not have their question answered, then reach out to these guys, shoot them an email, go to their website, get in touch with them, use them as a resource. They'll answer your questions. And because I mean, there's still a lot of really good questions here. I mean, like I said, people on my subscriber list are freaking sharp. All right. Who's next? Bill Fenton says, awesome content. Jill, do you have to have an MLO on the refinance?
Well, refinance out of the seller carry into a regular loan?
I mean, if you're just refinancing your own property, who, you're going to refinance it with the bank typically. They're a mortgage loan originator.
Yeah, anybody that does a loan has to be licensed. So,
Right.
So,
Thanks to the new guidelines.
yeah.
Sam Cox, would Mark and Terry recommend having a checklist of disclosures required under Dodd-Frank and have title attorney record the seller-buyer agreement with the checklist at closing?
Yeah, we've closed a couple now, and we're creating our attorney. What did he call it? I guess, for lack of a better word, a booklet where, see, there's certain things that need to happen at certain times, and certain people need to do them. So you've got escrow, you've got title, you've got the loan officer, you've got the buyer and the seller, and they're all through the process needing to. It's like an orchestra. They all have to be done at the right time and to be compliant and all that. So we're creating a folder that we'll have through our attorney at some point that really defines step by step how it needs to happen, because it's brand new, and I think we're going to be on the cutting edge of it because not a lot of people are doing it.
Mm-hmm. All right, one more question, guys, and then we're going to need to wrap up and let Mark and Terry go home and to sleep. So who was next? I'm going to take them in the exact order. A bunch of people are typing in, thank you very much for the webinar. Thank you for the content. Great content. Okay, Alex, who is legally responsible, the MLO or the seller lender? That's actually a good question. Are we not better to use a lawyer rather than a mortgage loan originator who won't go to court for us like a lawyer will?
You know what's ironic is unless an attorney is the personal attorney of the seller, I would imagine, attorneys are not exempt from licensing under from an MLO requirement. Same thing with real estate agents; they're not exempt either. So, and it boils down to that conspiracy theory I have, that I think the government wants every single loan registered in the NMLS registry, because they have not exempted anybody from being able to do these except for MLO.
Which is definitely a departure from how attorneys have been exempt in pretty much all real estate law up until this point. And it's really a brave new world in that sense.
A brave new world. It is indeed. I mean, there's clearly a lot of still misinformation, misconceptions about this topic.
Yep.
And you guys have really helped clear it up for people, hopefully. And we need to go ahead and wrap it up, guys. If we haven't gotten to your question, I'm sorry, but we took them in the order in which we've gotten them. So use these guys as a resource. You've got their email address right there. You've got their website. Go to their website, enter your information so you're on their mailing list. Mark and Terry have great content. They're really good guys to know.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, I'm exhausted. My brain is exploding. I'm gonna go stick my head in a bucket of ice, or maybe I'll just go watch Vikings to kind of turn my brain off. So, guys, thank you very much for doing this webinar. Everybody's typing into the chat box. Big thanks to everybody. Enjoyed the content. I got a lot out of it. I know everybody else did. So, last chance before we close this down, guys. Write down their information. Write down their phone number, their email address. It's all right there on the screen. And we're gonna close it down. Mark, Terry, thank you very, very much for being on with us tonight.
Yeah, our pleasure. Our pleasure.
Take care.
All right, guys. Have a good night.